This is On the Hunt at foxnews.com. Hello, everybody. I'm Jonathan Hunt. With every passing day, Yemen seems to fall into greater chaos, with rebels backed by Iran battling forces loyal to the government of President Hadi, who has fled in the meantime to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, meantime, is carrying out airstrikes against those Iranian-backed rebels. What does it all mean for the Middle East as a whole? What does it mean for the United States? To try to answer those questions, I'm joined now by James Phillips, who is Senior Research Fellow for Middle Eastern Affairs at the Heritage Foundation, and Colonel Cedric Leighton, President of Cedric Leighton Associates. Gentlemen, good to have you both here. Thank you for being here.
You bet, Jonathan. Good to be with you.
James, let me start with you. It's a very confusing situation in Yemen, I think, for a lot of ordinary Americans. What are we looking at here? Is this a question of sectarian battles being fought? Simply that? What is the role of Al-Qaeda in this, and what are the wider implications of the Saudi and Iranian influences? Can you lay the table for us in the most basic terms?
Well, the struggle in Yemen is very complex. Former Yemeni President Saleh said that he was often dancing on the heads of snakes, and that suggests some of the great pitfalls in this very poor, very mountainous, very factionalized country. There was a struggle between the Yemeni government and the Al-Qaeda franchise, AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, going on before the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring greatly weakened President Saleh, pushed him out of office. He was replaced by President Hadi, who was in a weaker position. Saleh then flipped and allied with the Houthi rebels, who he had fought 6 wars with over the last 15 or 20 years. And the Houthis, backed by Iran, have overrun the government, pushed Saleh's successor out of the country, and now are dominating Yemen.
And Colonel, there's some concern that amid this kind of chaos that James lays out so clearly for us there, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, one of the most dangerous of the Al-Qaeda affiliates in the world, could benefit from that. Do you subscribe to that view?
I do, Jonathan, and the reason I subscribe to that view is that the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula has always been one of those organizations that has gotten into areas that are basically ungoverned spaces. So Yemen is a prime example of this now, with its civil war brewing the way it's going on right now. You are finding that it is a perfect location for Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula to not only flourish, but in essence to regroup and not only get to the point where they had been a few years ago, but to perhaps surpass that point in terms of their ability to recruit followers, to gain financing, to do all of the things that a terrorist organization needs to do. And so, yes, it is a fertile ground for AQAP.
James, would you agree? Are we looking at a situation where Yemen could very simply become the new Afghanistan, with Al-Qaeda really making it a strong base for the planning and plotting of operations, which could then affect U.S. interests?
Yes, I would agree. Nature abhors a vacuum, but terrorists love them, and there's a huge vacuum developing now amid this kaleidoscopic civil war in Yemen. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is now in a position where it can claim to be the champion of all Yemeni Sunnis against the Houthis, and that'll greatly strengthen its appeal. And this is important for the U.S. because Yemen is the back door to Saudi Arabia, not only geopolitically, but there are many Yemeni workers working inside Saudi Arabia. And if one hostile force should unify Yemen, then that's bad news for Saudi Arabia, one of the swing producer in the global oil market.
And Colonel, I'm interested in your perspective as a veteran of the U.S. Air Force. The Saudi air campaign, can it prevent the advance of the rebels on its own, or do there need to be ground troops sent in, but possibly by the Saudis?
There really need to be ground troops, Jonathan, and the reason there need to be ground troops is that air campaigns can do a lot in terms of pressuring the opponent, forcing the opponent into certain areas. The more problematic aspect with air campaigns is, will they break the will of the opponent? And in this particular case, I think what we're seeing is a stealing of the resolve among the Houthis. You're also seeing, of course, you're seeing AQAP moving forward to claim its share of the territory, or what it believes to be its share of the territory of Yemen. And that is going to cause a very nasty situation that cannot be solved by air power alone. So the Saudis will have to commit ground forces, and we've seen that they've made moves with Pakistan to ask the Pakistanis to help them with ground troops, and I think that's really the precursor to some kind of a ground movement of some type.
James, how bad is the prognosis here? I mean, when you see the Saudis involved on one side, the Iranians involved on another, could we be headed to something much, much bigger than just a civil war in Yemen?
I think both Saudi Arabia and Iran see Yemen through the lens of their intensifying Cold War, which is rapidly turning into a hot war in several theaters. They're at daggers drawn in Yemen. In Syria, Iran supports the Assad dictatorship, while Saudi Arabia supports Sunni rebel groups. In Iraq, Iran is supporting radical Shia militias, while the Saudis are reaching out to Sunni Arab tribes in the western Iraq. In Bahrain, Iran is stirring up trouble among the Shia majority, while the Saudis support the Sunni ruling family. And there are rising tensions in Saudi Arabia's eastern province, which is predominantly Shia, and the Saudis are alarmed that Iran may be making inroads there.
Colonel, let me just wrap it up with you. Do you see us on the path here to some wider Sunni-Shia war throughout the Middle East that could engulf the entire region? Are things that bad right now?
I think they are, and it's very unfortunate. We had an opportunity 2-3 years ago to put a stop to parts of these conflicts that James was referring to. But what you're basically seeing is the encirclement of Saudi Arabia, or the attempted encirclement of Saudi Arabia by Iran and its proxies. To the north you have Syria and Iraq, to the south you have Yemen, and of course to the north and east you have Iran itself. So those are the areas that the Iranians are using to basically leverage their forces, both proxy and their own internal forces, against the Saudis. And James points out very correctly that internally to Saudi Arabia, the Shiite majority in the eastern province has been restive for a very long time. And of course, that's the oil producing region, and that makes a big, big difference in this case. It's basically the 21st century version of the Balkans.
Wow, it's a frightening situation, and one we will keep an eye on. I thank you both for your expertise today. Colonel Cedric Leighton, President of Cedric Leighton Associates, and James Phillips, Senior Research Fellow for Middle Eastern Affairs at the Heritage Foundation. Gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, guys. This has been On the Hunt at foxnews.com.